Amara wakes up before the sun rises, her hands already busy before the village even stirs. She cooks, cleans, and does whatever it takes to care for her sick mother, Sanyu. While other girls her age dream of marriage or adventure, Amara's only dream is to see her mother smile again. Every coin she earns goes toward medicine. Every hour of her day revolves around making sure Sanyu has what she needs. The villagers watch her with admiration, whispering about her strength and devotion. But inside her own home, respect is nowhere to be found. Her uncle, Gatimu, sees her as nothing more than a burden. Her aunt, Nyoka, scoffs at her efforts, rolling her eyes whenever Amara sacrifices her own needs. "Why waste your life on a woman who won't live much longer?" they say, their voices dripping with cruelty. To them, Sanyu is already gone, and Amara is just another fool wasting time. Sanyu's breathing had become shallow, her once strong voice now just a whisper. Each cough shook her frail body, like a tree caught in a storm. Amara sat beside her, pressing a damp cloth to her forehead, willing her mother to fight a battle she was losing. But love alone couldn't heal her. She needed medicine, something stronger than the herbs Amara could find in the village. There was only one person who had the money to help. With a deep breath, Amara stood and walked toward the main house. Gatimu sat in his large wooden chair, his feet up, chewing lazily on roasted meat. His wife, Nyoka, fanned herself beside him, her jewelry clinking as she adjusted her necklace. Amara hesitated at the doorway, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. She had never asked them for anything, but this was for her mother. She stepped forward, swallowing her pride. "Uncle, please, I need help." Gatimu barely glanced at her, uninterested. "What help?" Amara clenched her fists. She knew he wouldn't make this easy. "Sanyu is getting worse. The herbs aren't enough anymore. I need money to buy medicine from the traders in the next village." For a moment, there was silence. Then Gatimu threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh that came from amusement. It was cruel, mocking, dripping with pure heartlessness. "Medicine?" he scoffed. "For what? That woman is as good as dead. You might as well throw coins into a fire." Amara's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to stand tall. "She's still alive," she said firmly. "She's still my mother." Nyoka, who had been watching quietly, let out a sharp sigh. "And for how much longer, really?" she said, tilting her head. "She's been sick for years. She's just dragging you down. You waste your youth taking care of a dying woman, and for what?" Amara felt a burning anger rise in her chest, but she held it back. "Because she's my mother," she repeated, her voice shaking. "And I won't let her die if I can help it." Gatimu leaned forward, his eyes dark. "And what do I get in return, huh? If I give you money, what do I gain?" Amara's hands trembled. I'll work. I'll do anything." Another laugh. He shook his head, as if disappointed by how pathetic she sounded. "You already work, girl, from sunrise to sunset. And guess what? You're still useless." Amara's heart pounded. She turned to Nyoka, desperate. "Aunt, please. You know how much she suffered. Just this once." Nyoka sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "You really don't get it, do you?" she murmured. Then she leaned closer to Gatimu and whispered something too quiet for Amara to hear. But whatever it was made his expression shift. His lips curled into something sinister, something cold. Amara took a step back, suddenly uneasy. What are you saying?" Nyoka's smile was slow, deliberate. "We're saying, dear child, that maybe we've been thinking too small." Gatimu nodded, rubbing his chin. "She's right. We were only planning to get rid of your mother." He looked Amara straight in the eyes. "But now I see the problem is much bigger." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. The walls of the house suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. "Get rid of—" Her voice barely came out. Nyoka gave a sweet, poisonous smile. "Oh, come now. Don't act so surprised. You've been an inconvenience since the day your father died. Always running around, wasting food, wasting time." She leaned forward, her voice soft but deadly. "Maybe it's time we finally cut off the dead weight." Amara's breath came in shallow gasps. They weren't just going to let her mother die. They were planning to get rid of her too. She stepped back, her body screaming at her to run, but her legs felt frozen. Gatimu was still watching her, his eyes filled with nothing but amusement. "You're lucky we let you stay this long," he said, stretching his arms like this was just another lazy afternoon. But luck runs out. Amara knew she had to leave, now before they had the chance to make good on their word. She turned on her heel and bolted, ignoring Nyoka's laughter behind her. She ran through the village, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. She didn't know where to go. She didn't know what to do. All she knew was that if she stayed, she wouldn't survive. The night was cold, and the stars above seemed farther away than ever. Amara's body ached with exhaustion, her legs weak from days of overwork and worry. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and now, even standing felt like a battle. Her mother's fever had worsened, her breathing shallow. Amara had done everything she could, but nothing was enough. She staggered into the courtyard, her vision blurry. The world around her tilted, the weight of her pain too much to carry. Then, without warning, her legs gave out. She crashed to the ground, her body too weak to rise. For a moment, there was silence. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate. Gatimu stood over her, arms crossed, looking down as if she were nothing more than dirt beneath his feet. Nyoka stood beside him, a smirk playing on her lips. Amara tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She reached out a trembling hand. "Please, help me." Gatimu let out a cold chuckle, shaking his head. "Help you?" he repeated, as if the very idea was amusing. "Tell me, girl, what have you ever done to deserve help?" Amara's chest tightened. "I took care of my mother. I worked every day. Nyoka clicked her tongue. "And yet, you still ended up like this," she said, eyes filled with cruel delight. "Pathetic." Amara tried to push herself up, but her arms failed her. She looked around at the servants, hoping for kindness in their eyes, but they all stood still, avoiding her gaze. No one would help. No one dared. Gatimu sighed dramatically. "Enough of this," he said, waving a hand. "Take her away." At first, Amara didn't understand, but then she felt hands grab her arms, rough and unkind. She gasped, struggling, but she was too weak to fight back. The servants lifted her like a broken object, carrying her toward the gate. "No, wait, please," she begged, her voice barely more than a whisper, but her words meant nothing. The gate swung open, and the night air hit her like a slap. Beyond the village lay only darkness. The Shadowlands, a place no one dared to go. It was said to be cursed, filled with wild animals and dangers unknown. No one who entered ever came back. Panic filled Amara's chest. "No, you can't, please. I have nowhere to go." Nyoka stepped forward, her smile sharp as a blade. She leaned down, her voice dripping with venom. "You have no place here anymore," she whispered. With that, the servants shoved Amara forward. She stumbled, her knees hitting the cold, hard ground. The gate slammed shut behind her with a final echoing boom. Silence. Amara lay there, too stunned to move. The house she had grown up in, the place where she had given everything, was now closed to her forever. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't save her now. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up. The wind howled through the trees, carrying strange, eerie sounds. Shadows shifted in the distance, eyes watching from the darkness. Fear gripped her, but she had no choice. She had to move. Step by step, she walked deeper into the unknown, leaving behind the life that had abandoned her. The night was endless, stretching into a terrifying unknown. Amara stumbled through the thick forest, her body weak, her stomach empty. Every shadow looked like a predator. Every rustling leaf made her heart race. She had never been this alone before. No warm fire, no comforting voice. Only the cold wind whispering through the trees. Her throat burned with thirst, and her legs shook with exhaustion. But she couldn't stop. Stopping meant giving up. Stopping meant death. A growl echoed in the distance. Her breath caught. She turned sharply, her eyes darting through the darkness. Wolves. Hyenas. She didn't wait to find out. She forced herself forward, pushing through the thick vines, ignoring the sharp thorns that tore at her skin. Then she saw it. A small stream glistening under the pale moonlight. Relief flooded through her. She dropped to her knees, cupped the cool water in her hands, and drank like it was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. But as soon as the water touched her lips, exhaustion crashed down on her. Her arms gave out, and she collapsed onto the damp ground. The night passed in a blur of shivers and nightmares. She dreamt of her mother's frail hands, of Gatimu's cold laughter, of the house she had once called home. But when morning came, there was no warm bed, no scent of food cooking over the fire, just the harsh reality of survival. Her stomach growled painfully. Hunger was a cruel thing. It gnawed at her insides, making her dizzy and weak. She needed food. But how? She had never hunted before. She barely knew which plants were safe to eat. She wandered deeper into the wilderness, her hands trembling as she plucked berries from a low bush. Were they poisonous? She hesitated, but hunger didn't wait for answers. She ate, chewing slowly, praying they wouldn't kill her. Hours passed, then days. She learned to find water by following the birds. She figured out which fruits wouldn't make her sick, but the nights were still terrifying. Strange noises surrounded her. Sometimes, she swore she saw eyes watching her from the darkness. She built small fires, hoping to keep the wild animals away, but the fear never left her. Then, one evening, she found it, hidden beneath thick vines and twisted roots. A cave, a place untouched by time. Its entrance was marked with strange carvings, symbols she didn't understand. It looked ancient, almost sacred, but fear and exhaustion had no time for caution. She stepped inside, her heart pounding. The air was cool, thick with the scent of damp earth. It was dark, but safe. No open sky, no creatures lurking in the shadows, just silence. For the first time in days, she felt a sliver of safety. She gathered leaves to make a bed, curled up in a corner, and let the darkness wrap around her. But survival wasn't just about finding shelter. She needed food, real food. She sharpened sticks into spears, watching how birds hunted, how they moved. She set traps near the river, learning from the land itself. The first time she caught a small rabbit, her hands trembled. She didn't want to kill, but hunger didn't care. With a whispered apology, she did what had to be done. The days turned into weeks. She became stronger, faster. She knew which trees had the sweetest fruit, which roots could be eaten. She learned how to move without making a sound, how to listen to the forest's whispers. She was no longer just a girl abandoned in the wilderness. She was a survivor, and the people who had thrown her away had no idea what she was becoming. The night was silent, except for the crackling of Amara's small fire. She sat near the entrance of her cave, staring at the flames, her mind lost in the past. The pain of betrayal still burned inside her, but she had survived. The girl who had once depended on others was gone. She was something else now, stronger, fiercer. Then, she heard it, a sound too soft for an animal, too careful for the wind, footsteps. Her body tensed. She grabbed her spear and turned swiftly, her heart pounding. Someone was there, standing just beyond the fire's glow. A man, tall and confident, his eyes sharp, studying her like she was a mystery he had been searching for. "You don't belong here," he said, stepping closer. "Neither do you," Amara shot back, tightening her grip on her weapon. He chuckled, unfazed. Fair enough. The stranger was different from anyone she had ever seen. His clothes were clean, made of fine fabric. His hands weren't rough like a villager's. He was from the city, Zawadi, she guessed. But what was he doing here, in the Shadowlands? She watched him closely, ready to fight if needed, but he didn't move aggressively. Instead, he crouched near the fire, warming his hands, as if he belonged there. "My name is Tafari," he said. "I've heard stories about this place, about a girl who survived alone when no one else could." He tilted his head, a small smirk playing on his lips. "I had to see if the legend was true." Amara narrowed her eyes. "I'm no legend." "You will be," he said, his voice sure, like he had already seen the future. "They didn't throw you away because you were weak. They threw you away because they feared your strength." His words hit something deep inside her. She had spent so long feeling abandoned, unwanted. But what if he was right? What if Gatimu and Nyoka had seen something in her that scared them? She didn't answer. She just looked at him, unsure whether to trust or chase him away. Tafari reached into his bag and pulled out a small bundle of food. "You're surviving," he said, handing it to her. "But are you living?" The smell of fresh bread filled her nose, making her stomach tighten. It had been so long since she had tasted anything other than wild berries and roasted meat. She hesitated, then took it. One bite, and it felt like a forgotten dream. Soft, warm, real. Tafari watched her, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," he said after a while. "There's a world beyond this place. A world where you can be more than just a girl who survived." Amara looked at the fire, the cave, the dark trees that had become her home. She had built herself up from nothing, learned to fight, to endure. But was that enough? For the first time in months, she let herself wonder, what if there was more? What if her story wasn't over yet? She met Tafari's gaze, her decision made. She would rise from her suffering, and she would make them all remember her name. Amara stepped into Zawadi for the first time, and the city roared around her. Tall buildings, busy streets, people moving fast, chasing money, power, and survival. The scent of fresh bread mixed with the stench of sweat and desperation. She had spent months in the wild, but this was a different kind of jungle. Tafari led her through the crowded markets, his eyes sharp, his steps confident. He knew this world, and now he was teaching her how to master it. You survived in the Shadowlands, he said. That means you can survive anywhere. Amara listened carefully, absorbing every lesson. She learned how merchants bought and sold, how prices rose and fell, how to spot greed, fear, and opportunity in a man's eyes. But learning wasn't enough. She needed to start something of her own. She thought back to the Shadowlands, to the herbs she had used to heal herself when no one else was there. She knew their power, their value, and so she made a decision. She would sell them. At first, people laughed. Who was this strange girl from nowhere, trying to trade in a city where only the strong survived? But then, something happened. A sick child drank her herbal tea and recovered within days. A merchant with aching joints found relief in her handmade oils. Word spread fast. They started calling her the girl from the shadows. She set up a small stall in the marketplace, simple but striking. Her products weren't just items, they were stories, proof that even in the darkest places, there was strength, there was healing. Tafari watched with a knowing smile. They doubted you, he said. Now they wait in line for what you offer. But Amara wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. She began trading in fabrics, spices, anything that held value. She learned how to negotiate, how to turn silver into gold. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building something unstoppable. The same people who once looked down on her now whispered her name. The girl who came from nothing, the girl who made a fortune from the dust. But Amara knew the truth. She wasn't just a girl anymore, she was a force. The mighty always believe they can never fall. Gatimu and Nyoka were once feared in Nyabari, their wealth and power towering over everyone. But greed is a hungry beast. It takes and takes until nothing is left. Their businesses crumbled, their land was seized, and those who once bowed before them turned their backs. The same villagers they had mocked now whispered about their downfall. Desperate and broken, they heard of a powerful woman in Zawadi, a woman who had risen from nothing and built an empire, a woman who was known for her wealth, wisdom, and unstoppable will. With nowhere else to go, they set off on a long journey to the city, clinging to the last bit of pride they had left. Zawadi was unlike anything they had seen before. Grand, ruthless, filled with opportunities and dangers. They pushed through the crowded streets, their eyes searching for salvation. When they finally reached the grand marketplace, they saw her, a woman dressed in the finest fabrics, sitting in a position of power, surrounded by traders and guards. She didn't beg, she didn't bow, she commanded. Gatimu and Nyoka's hearts pounded as they stepped closer, their hands trembling, their voices low. "We have come to seek your help," Gatimu said, swallowing his pride. The woman turned to them slowly, her eyes unreadable. For a moment, they felt the weight of her gaze, the silence stretching between them like a blade. Then she smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Their blood ran cold. That voice, that presence. It was Amara, the same girl they had tossed away like garbage, the same girl they had left to die. Now she sat before them, powerful, untouchable, and watching them with the same eyes that once held pain, but now held something else. Gatimu stumbled back. "It can't be." Nyoka's lips quivered, but no words came out. Amara leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "You threw me into the wild, thinking I would never return, but the wild made me stronger." Her voice was calm, but every word cut deep. They had come looking for mercy, but now they stood before the very person they had betrayed. And the worst part, she was no longer their victim. She was their judge. Gatimu's throat went dry. Nyoka's legs wobbled beneath her. The weight of their sins pressed down on them like an unforgiving storm. Amara sat before them, no longer the helpless girl they had thrown away. She was a queen now, powerful, untouchable, a storm wrapped in silk. "You abandoned me when I was weak," she said, her voice calm but sharp like a blade. "Now you are the weak ones." Silence swallowed the marketplace. Traders, villagers, even the guards stood frozen, their eyes darting between Amara and the two desperate figures kneeling before her. Gatimu tried to speak, but no words came. His lips trembled, his hands shook. Nyoka's eyes were wide with fear, her fingers digging into the ground as if she could escape the moment. Amara stood up slowly, walking around them, her footsteps echoing like thunder in their ears. "I remember the night you threw me out," she continued. "I begged for mercy, I begged for love, but you—" She turned to Nyoka. You sneered at me like I was nothing. And you, she faced Gatimu. You laughed as I was dragged away, sick and helpless. Gatimu's head dropped in shame. But look at me now, Amara whispered. She spread her arms slightly, letting them see the truth. She was no longer a beggar, no longer weak. She was a woman who had built something greater than they could ever dream of. And now, their fate rested in her hands. The crowd held its breath, waiting, watching. Would she destroy them? Would she humiliate them as they had humiliated her? Tafari stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Amara's. What will you do? He asked, his voice steady. He had seen her rise from the ashes. Now, he wanted to see how she would rule. Amara took a deep breath, looking down at the people who had once held power over her life. They were nothing now, nothing but two lost souls drowning in the same cruelty they had once inflicted on her. She could crush them, she could make them suffer. But then she smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Get up, she said. Gatimu and Nyoka looked at her, confused. If you want my help, you will have to earn it. Every coin, every bite of food, every moment of peace, you will work for it. Their eyes widened in shock. You will spend your days helping the poor, feeding the hungry, and healing the sick. You will serve those you once looked down on, and only then will I decide if you deserve to be saved. Gatimu nodded quickly, his pride shattered. Nyoka clutched her chest, breathing heavily, but she too nodded. The crowd murmured in awe. Amara had chosen a punishment worse than revenge. She had given them a chance to redeem themselves. But redemption was not easy, and Amara would be watching. Gatimu's hands trembled as he clutched the hem of his tattered robe. Nyoka, once so full of venom, now shook like a leaf in the wind. They had lost everything, their wealth, their status, their pride, and now they knelt before the very girl they had thrown away like trash. The marketplace was silent. Eyes watched from every direction, waiting to see what Amara would do. Would she punish them? Would she humiliate them? Would she cast them out, the way they had cast her away? Amara stepped forward, her gaze sharp, her presence commanding. She could feel the power in her hands, the control over their fates. She had suffered because of them. She had nearly died. And now, they were the ones begging for mercy. Tafari stood at her side, his expression unreadable. He had seen her rise from the shadows, had watched her transform into a woman stronger than anyone had imagined. But even he did not know what choice she would make. Gatimu lifted his head, his voice barely a whisper. Please, forgive us. Nyoka clutched her chest, tears rolling down her face. We were wrong, Amara. We were blinded by greed. We let our hearts turn to stone. Amara stared at them, her face unreadable. You threw me away, she said slowly. You let me suffer. You turned your backs on me when I needed you the most. Gatimu lowered his head in shame. You were my family, Amara continued, her voice cold but calm. And yet, you treated me worse than a stranger. Nyoka sobbed into her hands. We will do anything to make it right. Amara let the words hang in the air. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The old Amara, the one they had abandoned, would have craved revenge, would have wanted them to feel the same pain she had felt. But she was not that girl anymore. You want a second chance? She asked, her voice steady. Then earn it. Gatimu and Nyoka looked up, confusion in their eyes. You will spend the rest of your days serving the people you once ignored, Amara said. The poor, the weak, the sick, those you looked down on. You will work for them. You will give them everything you have left. She let the words settle in. And if you refuse, she continued, you will never see a coin from me. Never. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Amara wasn't just sparing them. She was forcing them to change. She was turning their punishment into a lesson. Gatimu's shoulders shook. He had spent his life chasing power, wealth, and control. And now, the only way to survive was to serve others. Nyoka's lips trembled. We will do it. The marketplace erupted into murmurs. Some people expected Amara to strike them down. Others had hoped for a harsher punishment, but none could deny the brilliance of her choice. Tafari studied her, admiration flickering in his eyes. She had chosen something far greater than revenge. She had chosen transformation. Gatimu and Nyoka bowed their heads, truly broken. They had no choice but to accept. And Amara, she turned her back on them, walking away with power in every step, because true victory was never in destruction. It was in rising above. The sun hung low in the sky as Amara stepped onto the dusty path leading to Nyabari. The village had not changed. The same mud houses, The same narrow roads, the same people who once pitied her, ignored her, or cast her aside. But she had changed. She was no longer the helpless girl who had begged for scraps and mercy. She was a woman of power, a woman of wisdom, a woman who had survived what should have destroyed her. The moment she entered, heads turned. Some villagers gasped, others whispered among themselves. No one had expected to see her again, and certainly not like this. She was no longer frail and broken. She stood tall, her presence commanding. The girl they threw away, someone murmured, is now the strongest among us. Another finished in awe. She walked past familiar faces, women who once pitied her, men who once mocked her, elders who once shook their heads and said she would never survive. Now their eyes held something different: respect, fear, admiration. Amara did not come back to prove anything to them. She had no interest in revenge, no desire to make them bow before her. She had returned for one reason only: to build something greater than herself. She had seen suffering, she had lived through it, and she refused to let others go through what she had. So she took the wealth she had earned in Zawadi and built a home, one for abandoned children, for the sick, for those cast aside like she once was. At first, people watched in silence, unsure of her intentions. But when the first sick mother was brought in and given care, when the first starving child was given food, when the first lost soul was given a bed to sleep in, they understood. She is not here for revenge, an old woman whispered. She is here to heal. More people came, some in need, others offering help. The very same villagers who had once ignored her suffering now worked beside her, building, cooking, tending to the sick. They saw that she had not just survived, she had risen. One evening, as she stood outside the home she had built, Tafari arrived. He had been watching her journey from afar, always knowing she would come back, always knowing she would turn her pain into something powerful. You could have stayed in Zawadi, lived in comfort, he said, watching as children laughed and played in the courtyard. But you came back. Amara smiled. Comfort was never my goal. Purpose was. He nodded, understanding her completely. The village of Nyabari had once thrown her away. Now it stood because of her. And as the sun set, casting golden light over the land, Amara knew this was only the beginning. If Amara's journey inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And before you go, check out these videos on the screen for more amazing stories of strength and resilience. No matter how hard life knocks you down, your strength and willpower can turn even the darkest moments into something powerful. Never let anyone define your worth. Your journey is yours to make.